if someone was trying to sum this up, would it be accurate to say, and again, I'm speaking more with what Brian and Anna Marie's philosophy is, I'm not as familiar with Beth and Brigitte on the food, but would it be accurate, Brian and Anna Marie, to say that you're saying twice a day juice? Juicing means 2 ounces of wheatgrass and a 16-ounce glass of celery and sunflower sprout juice. So twice a day you do that, and then twice a day, once at lunch and once at dinner, you have a salad. And the salad has green vegetables and has unlimited sprouts. And a sprout is just a fancy word for saying any seed that's 2 or 3 days old. So that means broccoli broccoli, onions, garlic, cress, dill, any herb, any vegetable has a seed, and when the seed is 3 days old, that's a sprout. And you're saying take these sprouts along with beans and grains and sprout them for 2 or 3 days. Put all these sprouts and green vegetables in a big salad, and twice a day, once for lunch, once for dinner, you have that, and twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon, you have your wheatgrass juice and your green juices. And this low sugar, low fruit,
high nutrient
raw diet, this is what you have done for 40 years that has caused people to be able to have a completely different result. Is that accurate? Or would you add
this
to
is
it?
what Anna Marie and I have done for 45 years with, in my case, 260,000 people at the Institute, as well as in Europe when I ran centers. And this is what the Institute has done since 1956. And I will once again repeat, I've never seen any organization have 60 years of clinical research on lifestyle. And so we don't think this works, we know it works, we know how it works. Now we have the scientific community rallying around these type of ideas and giving us data and empirical evidence that we didn't have ourselves. We have study after study that show that you could sustain and thrive on these foods. I can't think of sustaining and thriving only on vegetables that were grown 2 or 6 weeks ago in California that I'm buying. You can't do that. I can't see you sustaining on fruit that's picked on ripe and usually is acid and actually robs the body of nutrients and has, because of the hybridization over centuries, shocking amounts of sugar in it. I can see you survive, not to say this is very new to a lot of the people listening, on weeds. We say that edible weeds are equal in nutrients, the only thing totally equal to nutrients in sprouts. And nobody's done the due diligence, but I'm sure when we start to look at weeds and the phytonutrients, the anti-disease elements that are in weeds are probably rivaling, if not better than or equal to, sprouts. And so if everything shut off today and there was never another food in a supermarket, I could absolutely tell you we'd thrive eating off the land. And I'm glad this man talks about going back to the wild again. It's a little obscure for most of us to do that, but on the other hand, it really makes good sense. It's a good, poignant way to tell people what we're missing.
So, our guests, for example, that comes to the Institute are put on a 100% raw diet, and we tailor the program. So there are people that needs to be 80-20. They will have steamed vegetables and baked sweet potatoes and squash and sometimes beans and grains. And, we just talked to a young girl, though, that has cancer before we left the Institute. And, we're going 100% raw. And she's totally aware. She's smarter than smart. And, but food is food. And so we promised we're going to make pizza. But we make a raw pizza. It's in the dehydrator. We make hummus. It's raw. We make guacamole. We make chia pudding. And her face light up like, okay, I can do this. Give me pizza any day. So, there's a time for being stricter, like 100%, and I think all of us know when that time is in, and we will accept that. And then there's a time where 80-20, most things in our life works 80-20. That's the balance, usually. And so if 80% of my diet is raw, and that means the juices, that means the wheatgrass and my green drinks, that means my big sprout salads and anything alive I can find that's wild. And it means that some of my vegan choices of beans or grains and vegetables and root vegetables especially can be steamed or baked. So 20% can be added to that, and that often makes it more palatable for most families to be able to do it. And you know, but when you see what 100% does, like you know, I mean, we deal with people all the time. Of course, a lot of people have very, very serious diseases and pain and like one man we just had here for 3 weeks, he couldn't eat when he came. He was in so much pain, he was so nauseous, and cancer has spread, and because of all the morphine he was on, his head could not function. He felt like, I don't have a brain. After 3 weeks, pain was so much less that he could eat, had no more nausea, and he said, I got my brain back. And that's live food for just 3 weeks. So, you know, he had a new life. His wife and him left in the feeling of, we're starting a new life.
They were both physicians.
Yes. And, you know, we got life back. So it takes, that food comes in with frequency. You know, our body works on 75 hertz, that's ultimate. Our brain, 75, 85, so our organs are on different hertz. And it's amazing to see how you actually can move our frequency, and stress and foods and disease and medication, of course, is a big part of suppressing that. But then when I get live food in, I move it out. I move my frequency and my energy, and I feel it. I feel that. And that's what we hear from our students all the time, like, I have energy, you know. And so that's the new lease. That's the new lease. And any child feels that faster than an adult because they regenerate so much faster. The stem cell they make so much faster. That's the beauty of working with children. And I wish every child had a chance to go on live food. And you make it fun. You know, you make it so that it's palatable for them. But the ones that we have worked with, and we've worked with a lot of kids with autism, the first week, you have to barter with them. It is not the food that they're, because they like so much more of sugar and high-fat products.
You can tell why they have autism. You can see the patterns.
Yeah, but it changes, and week after week it changes, especially as, of course, parents are there and they're taking part of that. So
we have to retrain the mom and dad more
than
the kids.
That's usually that's usually the deal. You know, we have our own addictions, and we put them on our kids because we want them to be like ourselves. Yeah.
There was one word that you mentioned, which I really liked, Anna Maria, which is tailored.
Yes.
And while I agree that there are fundamentals across the board that should be applied. Food should be organic. It should be as fresh as possible. It should be, you know, as natural and as close to the earth as you can get. Yeah. But I do think that, you know, when there's different conditions, sometimes, and different people, we need to take all that into consideration. And bioindividuality is kind of the buzzword for the 21st century, which is, let's take into consideration what this person's microbiome looks like. They may be preferring these foods because it's not them making the choices, it's actually the microbes in their gastrointestinal tract releasing chemicals which are telling the brain to choose this food. It might be mitochondrial dysfunction, which is having them preferentially choose carbohydrates over something else. People have, you know, genes do matter. I mean, there's this whole science of nutrigenomics where, you know, you have a certain propensity to handle and deal with certain types of foods and certain types of chemicals and biochemical interactions in your environment because of your genetic code. So all those things play into bioindividuality. So I think, you know, that should be taken into consideration. For instance, you know, kids who have intractable seizures do better on a ketogenic diet for a period of time until they can stabilize, as an example of, you know, one type of specific situation. And also differentiating between people who are really sick might need might need to adhere to some rigorous requirements for diet, more so than somebody who's just trying to improve their health and feel better. I think there's, you know, the 80-20 thing, you want to do 100% if you're really, really sick. It's really important to do that. But then, you know, the 80-20 approach is more doable if you have a certain level of health. So again, bioindividuality, I think, is key. There's a really great resource out there. It's called the Institute for Bioindividual Nutrition, which is run by a woman named Julie Matthews, and she specializes in treating children with chronic inflammatory conditions, particularly autism, ADHD, but looking at them as bioindividuals. And there's tons of resources out there. There's integrative and holistic dietitians, health coaches, institutes like your institute that provide education, because I think the scariest thing for people is, what do I eat tomorrow? What do I do? So I think it's okay to seek help, but look for those that have a more integrative and holistic approach rather than a dietitian that was sort of trained with the, what do they call that? The plate or the FDA guidelines, right? Right.
And kids are so sensitive about being different
Yes.
than the others. And there's always this feeling of like, I want to be like everybody else. And so it's really important to try to find community and gather in potlucks with other like-minded people. So it's not just them, but if you can find other, whatever it is, whether it's vegan or raw or gluten-free or vegetarian, but to let them meet other kids their age that are, doing a similar thing, so they're less, it boosts their confidence and they don't feel like they're being overly weird. Because that really is a real thing for kids. My kids said, can't we go to a doctor just once to see what it's like? all our other friends go and they talk about it. And I also remember one time both of my kids had strep throat and I treated them with herbs. And I don't think everyone should just treat strep throat. It can be a serious condition. And at the end of the week, one of them said to me, you treated us with herbs and we missed like the whole week of school. I just thought you should know. My friends had antibiotics and they were back in school the next day. And then at the end of the school year, one of them said to me, well, we actually missed less school because we only had strep throat once. The other kids who did the antibiotics had it 3 or 4 times.
Interesting.
And I also think if you allow them to be sick and go through the process of, whether it's be fasting or just having clear liquids or doing herbs, you actually are building your health and building your strength rather than damaging your immunity by going for antibiotics overly so. That's really one of the things that's damaging us. And we know that a lot of kids with ADHD are also the same kids that have had frequent ear infections.
Yeah.
So you do a lot of antibiotics, it kills the good and the bad bacteria. Now you have food intolerances that maybe you didn't have before, and it sets up a vicious cycle.
Matter of fact, the French did remarkable work and showed that chronic ear infections are part of what we call the autistic spectrum, which ADD is part of, dyslexia is part of. And one of our colleagues, you can see these on YouTube, we did 3 nights on autism, and we brought a psychiatrist friend of ours in from UCLA, a psychologist from Los Angeles, and they spoke about the education they got and how, in fact, when the French came to the United States and started to precipitate this education, the government asked them to leave. This goes back 20 years ago. They also, one night we brought in 3 families, of which 2 of them had reversed autism. And you talk about ketogenic diet, which unfortunately promotes the use of dairy food. So what we did is we invited this woman into Hippocrates. We had a food as medicine conference. So as Stephen has selected the top people in the world to come here, we selected the top cutting edge, under scrutiny scientists from around America, people who were out of the loop, who were constantly worrying about losing their job from universities. And after 3 days at the Institute, they said, we can tailor that to put healthy fats into the brains of people. We don't have to give disease-causing dairy to people. That is not only an allergen, but in fact gives cancer to you more than any other substance that we put into our body. So I think, I'm a round table guy. I think there is only one right way, what's best for the people.
Yes.
And I think we need to sit at the round table and basically say, hey, here's what I'm good at, here's what you're good at, let's learn together how we can make things better. And that's really where healthcare has to go. We're all going to die. It's that simple.